Hey folks, this is Chandran here. Welcome along, and today we're going to be taking a look at the updated version of my TAF build. It's a main character, face, skill monkey, and at this point very powerful in combat. We're now at level 8 and have arrived at the last light in. The reason I mention this is that I find that itemization is at least half the build in BG3, and the items I will be utilizing for this build are all items that are available at or before this point. The base of the build is 6 levels of Swordsbard, and I've slapped 2 levels of Warlock on top of that. You could go for 2 levels of Ranger instead, making an arguably slightly stronger build, but personally I think I prefer the Warlock version. I'll however be going over both versions here. The intention with the build is to have a main character capable of handling all the talky stuff, all the roguey stuff, and most of the thinky stuff as well, all while being as powerful in combat as possible. I'm playing a half of it because of RP reasons, but the build is technically stronger as a Gith, so if you don't mind Githing, you should definitely go for that. Getting access to full 5 more skills from your race is hard to beat for a build like this. Also, Misty Step is an awesome emergency mobility tool. Yeah, good. Without further ado, let's get into the build itself. For our first level, we are going with Bard, because Bard. For the cantrips, we are taking Mage Hand and Friends. Mage Hand is great in combat for throwing potions on your friends. It's also nice out of combat in that sometimes it can reach items that you cannot reach in any other way. Don't know why it's scripted like that, but it is, even stuff that familiars cannot reach. Friends is the other one I would take. You can take Light instead, depending on your preferences. For spells, I'm going with Disguise Self and Speak with Animals to have the talky stuff covered on my main. I want Healing Word to be able to pick up companions at a range without having to shoot potions or throw potions. And I want Thunderwave in order to be able to knock people out of buildings and stuff like that. For the abilities, it's important to note that this is a respec. 8 Dexterity is not something we actually want to play with until we get the Gloves of Dexterity that we're going to be utilizing with this build, so just keep that in mind. Strength 8, we don't care about strength at all, and as said, Dexterity will be covered by our gloves. For Constitution, I have it at 16. If you are going for the Gith version of the build, you should probably lower this to 13 and get your Wisdom up to 14, because then you would have one of the skills available. We aren't going to be taking Wisdom skills on this version of the build, so we don't care that much about our Wisdom score. Intelligence 14 to get a little buff to some of our skills. We are using a lot of intelligence-based skills, so that's quite great. And lastly, Charisma 17. Charisma is very important for us, and 17 means that we can use Auntie Ethel's hair to get all the way to 18 for the nice +4 bonus. For the skills, if you're going with the Warlock version of the build, we take Sleight of Hand and Investigation. If you're going for the Ranger version of the build, you take Deception and Persuasion. I think the Ranger version is technically stronger, but I have been playing the Warlock version, and that's one I'm going to be showcasing here. Just keep in mind that you can choose either of these and you're still going to get a very strong build. For level 2, we are taking our first level of Warlock or Ranger. I'm picking up Eldritch Blast and Blade Ward here. I like having Eldritch Blast, obviously, especially for the first 5 levels. Blade Ward is nice. Just having this available on most of your characters means that whomever is in a bad position, you can cast this on and they can more or less tank any situation. At least as long as we're talking about bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, of course. Subclass, we're going for the Great Old One in order to get Mortal Reminder. When you land a critical hit against a creature, that creature and any nearby enemies must succeed a Wisdom saving throw or become frightened until the end of the next turn. This is great. The Frightened debuff is actually quite strong, giving them disadvantage on attack rolls, ability checks as well, but less relevant. And the fact that they cannot move means that since we are using a ranged build here, this can be quite powerful CC. For our spells, we are picking up Hex and either Armor of Agathis or Expeditious Retreat. We are going to be picking the other one of them up on the next one. For level 3, we are taking level 2 Warlock and getting our invocations. For the spell, as talked about before, we just pick up the third one that we didn't take before. Eldritch Invocations, we want Beguiling Influence. This is how we get our skills, Deception and Persuasion, that we really want. If you were going Ranger instead, you're picking up the ones that give you skills from there. You need to pick up the one that gives you Sleight of Hand and the one that gives you Investigation. It's 2 different ones there. You can find them yourself as level 1 Ranger. The second one you're going to be picking up here is Agonizing Blast. At least for while you're leveling. You could argue that at this point, at level 8, you don't really need this that much anymore. It's very rare that you need to rely on Eldritch Blast instead of just using your main attacks. Instead, you could be going for Devil's Sight just to get a little longer dark vision. This could be nice since you're shooting at range. So pick whichever one you please while leveling Agonizing Blast at level whenever you are ready to go all in on the Swordsbard part. Take Devil's Sight. The triggering factor is really whether or not you have access to extra attack. Good. We don't need to replace a spell here. And now we have what we want from Warlock, really. For the leveling part, we wanted the Agonizing Blast, and for the last part here, we wanted, of course, the subclass ability, and then we wanted our skills. And Hex, not to forget. Hex is quite powerful, and it's one of the only spells we are going to be using in combat with this build. We're going back to Bard now. Picking up a spell here, I'm going to take Featherfall. I like having this available on the character that I'm actually piloting out in the world, and if we were able to pick up Jump, we would have done that on this character as well, just so we don't have to swap back and forth between characters too much while on the overland map. There's no reason to replace any spell. Oh yeah, the Jump part is also a point in favor of the Ranger, because that actually allows you to pick up the Jump spell. For level 5, we are now going level 3 Bard, grabbing our first second level spell. While leveling, you should probably take something like Cloud of Daggers here. But at the point where we're at, we don't want to be casting spells in combat. So either Calm Emotions, because in the situations where this is powerful, this is really powerful. Getting immune to Frightened or Charmed can be a game changer in certain combats. Or alternatively, you can take something that you use out of combat, like Enhance Ability, which is probably a nice pickup. Or there's also the chance of lesser restoration, but you can get arrows that has this effect instead, and you should probably be doing that, as instead of taking off all of your action, it only takes up one of your attacks to use such an arrow. So that's stronger. I'm taking Calm Emotions, and then I'm going on to my subclass here. Instead of College of Law, I'm picking College of Swords. I want to be able to get access to both, first of all, the extra attack, and these, especially the Slashing Flourish range here is very strong. For our fighting style, we are going for 2-weapon fighting. The extra ability modifier added to the damage of our offhand attacks is great, even if we do not have too many offhand attacks. And dueling basically does nothing for us, so we are going to take 2-weapon fighting here. Lastly, we're going back here to Bard in order to set up our expertise that we pick up at this level. I would not take Deception and Performance. I would take Persuasion and Sleight of Hand. If you are not going to be pickpocketing, you shouldn't care about Sleight of Hand. There's plenty of bonuses out there for that, for all of your disarm and lockpicking stuff. But if you are, this is rather important, I'd say. Makes your chance of actually pickpocketing successfully that much higher. And Persuasion is great, because we want to be persuading. No reason to replace any spells. We would be able to pick up a second level spell here instead of a first level, but I like having a lot of first level options because of my Warlock spell slots. For level 6, we get a second cantrip, still going Bard here. I'm picking up Minor Illusion at this point. As you will notice, I never took Vicious Mockery. People like this a lot, and it can be good at the very low levels, but since we're picking up Eldritch Blast from level 3 with this version, we would only have to play around with it on level 2, and I don't think that's enough relevance for it. For spells, at this point, let's take Enhance Ability, same reasoning as before. And for the feat, we are taking, and this is important, Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is very powerful, plus 10 damage on each of your attacks, and you have a lot of attacks. It's very strong. The -5 penalty on attack rolls is something that you do have to alleviate somehow. We have a couple of items that gives us some bonuses to attack, and also a high dexterity in order to be able to hit. Look out for getting high ground, obviously, and specifically advantage or effects like Bless help you a lot with this effect. The other part of it, ignoring low ground here, is not as relevant, but can come in handy at certain times when you're out of position. But definitely Sharpshooter is going to be like match winning for us here. Level 7, we're taking Bard level 5, and now we're getting close to the good stuff. We are getting Font of Inspiration. You regain all of your bardic inspiration after a long or short rest. This means that we now have our flourishes on short rest cooldown instead. We also get the improved bardic inspiration for a little higher benefit from bardic inspiration. We mostly use this for flourishes, so it's just a tiny bit of extra damage, so that's not the important part. For spells, we get our first level 3 spell, and there's not a lot of really relevant level 3 spells here. You can take up something like Hypnotic Pattern or Fear. I'm taking Fear because one of my other characters are set up to take advantage of when people are frightened because of the proc of this guy. We could replace a spell to get another 3rd level spell, but I don't really care for the 3rd level spells here, to be honest, so let's not do that. You do you, of course. And finally, we are now getting extra attack from our level 6 of Sword Bard. Picking up another 3rd level spell could be something like Plant Growth. The quartering of movement can be relevant at times, so let's just take that. No need to replace the spell. And here we go with the build itself. Last part of what I would consider the build is Elixirs Powers. I won't talk that much about this, there are some things, but it's not that relevant for this part of the build. The only one I would definitely suggest you take is this one, Favorable Beginnings. The first attack roll or ability check you make against any target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. The important part of this one on your face is that this triggers in conversations. So the first ability check, roll, skill check, whatever you want to call it, in a conversation gets this +3 bonus, which is amazing because you're going to be talking with a lot of different people. Also getting it when you're shooting down people is great, of course, for combat. For items, let us start with the Gloves of Dexterity. We've already touched on this a bit, that we set only 8 dexterity during our character creation. This is how we allow ourselves to do that, because this sets the wearer's dexterity score to 18, and it also allows us a +1 bonus to attack, which is great. It helps alleviate the sharpshooter penalty a bit. It also allows us a little more choice about our armor. We can either go for a strong medium armor, like the Scale Mail +2 or something simple like that. I like the +1 bonus to initiative rolls from this one, so that is one option. A slightly stronger option, I think, would be to be using something like the Protective Sparks Wall and have a major armor cast on you by someone in camp. This would mean you have 19 armor class instead of 20 most of the time, but when you activate your boots, that I'll talk about in a second, you will get lightning charges. And then this one will give you +1 extra armor class and +1 extra saving throw. You also get the extra +1 bonus to spell save DC all of the time, which is amazing. Not that you're using them that often, but once in a while you do have something that requires a save. So it's a slightly stronger option. Lastly, you have the Graceful Cloth for when you need to disarm or lockpick or something like that. You can put it on and get advantage on your disarms. For boots, this is our way of getting lightning charges if you want those. The reason I say if we want those is that it's a bit finicky to set it up. You need to be standing in water when your turn starts for this to activate. Just drop down like a carafe of water or something before the combat and make sure to stand in it. You will electrify the water and you'll get your lightning charges. Lightning charges also gives us +1 to attack rolls, once again help alleviating the sharpshooter penalty. And the extra 1 lightning damage counts as something called a separate damage instance, which for us it's only relevant in that it can proc our hex a second time. So if we have a hex active on a target and we shoot them while we have lightning charges, the hex is going to trigger twice. You can do a lot of shenanigans with these extra damage instances, and I'll talk more about that in one of my next builds, the Karlach build. But for this guy, it's not too relevant. Fourth item is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. When you inflict a condition, you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. Arcane Synergy does the following. Weapon attacks deal additional damage equal to affected entity's spellcasting ability modifier, and the affected entity in this case is us, so it deals +4 extra damage in each of our attacks, or if we manage to up our charisma a bit, it'll deal +, of course. So this is great because we have a lot of attacks, usually like 4 in a turn, 5 in a turn, and that's a lot of extra damage just coming from this item alone. When you inflict a condition, it says, so we need to inflict a condition in order to trigger it. But luckily that's extremely easy to do, as performing counts as a condition. As you will notice here, I perform, and it doesn't actually perform because it triggers the item, which cuts off the perform. But what happens instead is that I do get the Arcane Synergy. You can do it again here. It doesn't matter which perform, of course. So you can trigger this without using any actions. You can do it at any time, in combat, out of combat, whatever. So you will always have this buff active when you remember to click it. The fifth item is Knife of the Undermountain King. This item might be stronger for like an Astarian melee build or something like that. But I really like it here because it works as a stat stick. The Organ Rearranger ability here. This wielder scores a critical hit when rolling a 19. When they roll 2 damage or less, reroll the dice, taking the highest result. This part of the weapon triggers or works with our ranged attacks as well. So that's awesome. For our weapons, we are just using whatever hand crossbows we have available. I'm using a hand crossbow +1 and fire stoker here. If you have someone who can reliably cause burning, you should probably put the fire stoker in the main hand because of the extra +1d4 piercing, and you have a lot more main hand attacks than offhand attacks. But I don't, so I'm just using it in offhand because it doesn't have the +1 there. Technically, a +1 hand crossbow would have been better for me if I had one. For rings, we have the Sparks Wall. The wearer cannot be electrocuted. This is how we don't care about standing in electrified water. And this is an out-of-combat item, the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring. While shapeshifting or disguising yourself, gain plus 1d4 bonus to all checks. So as long as we are shapeshifted, let's do that. We get Mark of the Shifter here. Plus 1d4 bonus to all checks. This works in conversations, of course. So it's amazing for our face. And it also works for all of our disarm and lockpicking. It's just an all-round very, very strong item. If you want something that's a little more powerful in combat, this does nothing in combat, or basically nothing. You could just put on like a caustic band or something like that for your weapon attacks to deal a little more damage. If we need a little extra boost to our sleight of hand, we could slap on the Smuggler's Ring for plus 2, just in case we need to pickpocket someone with a DC of 30 with us, or disarm or unlock something like that. Just remember to take it off again, because we don't want the -1 to charisma, neither for combat nor for talking with people. Lastly, for our amulet, I would suggest the Amulet of Misty Step if you're not using it on someone else. There are basically no good amulets to use, so you might as well. Or alternatively, if you haven't read the Book of Necromancy all the way through, you could be using the Amulet of Lost Voices to have Speak with Dead available all the time. I like having these on my face. And finally, there's one item that I do not have equipped that I would like to talk about. It's a Transmuter Stone. You just have to have this in your inventory for it to work, and it grants the carrier proficiency in Constitution saving throws. As you can see here, I have plus 3 extra from proficiency to my Constitution saves, which is my concentration, of course. The way you get this is that you have Transmuter Wizard level 6. Transmuter is a subclass of Wizard to craft one for you, and then you can just kick them from the party afterward. You can use Scale as a Transmuter, or you can create a hireling. I have Sephosalomp here, made especially for these things, and of course for crafting potions and elixirs. For Elixir, I'd like to call out the Elixir of Bloodlust. It basically gives you an extra action each turn as long as you kill an enemy. So, also 5 extra temporary hit points, which does not matter as much. But the extra action is insanely powerful. And if you do like me and play very long between long rests, you can have these on forever, basically. That should be it for the build. So thank you for joining me if you have been. I hope you liked the build. I've been Shanton, and you've been awesome. Don't forget to do the YouTube stuff, and bye-bye.